Well, hi, everybody. I am Jay Jennings.
And I'm Courtney Joyner, and
Today, I'm excited to go over monster magazines, the great from the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And of course, the granddaddy of them all is Famous Monsters of Filmland by Forey Ackerman. And,
oh
uh,
yes,
and I'm going to give a
Dr.
little,
Acula.
right, Dr. Acula. Dracula? No, Dr. Acula. So I'm going to give a little background first on how it all started. If I can find my notes, okay. Let's put it up on the screen. It all started way back when, Court, when Shock Theater played on TV. Um, Back in the 60s, kids didn't have to wait till October to celebrate Halloween because of all the movies being sold to television in the 50s. So, there was a glutton of monster mags in the 60s. So it was Halloween all year long for monster kids. A package of old 30s and 40s Universal horror movies were sold to television stations under the name Shock Theater. So soon, every state was showing their versions of it with their own personal horror host. And I see if I have an advertisement for it here. Let me see. Here we go. I guess for the Invisible Ray, and it was on Friday nights at 11:30, and it was so popular that I guess they followed up with Super Shock. And this was the only time you hadn't. There was no, I mean, there were no VHS, and they really didn't play on TV. So this was the first time in history, and this is a famous thing, where Shock Theater reintroduced all these great classic horror films to a new generation. But then, how did the monster magazines come out of this? Well, kids couldn't see enough of this, Court. So I guess publishers wanted to make a quick buck, so they decided, why not put a monster magazine out that would be at drugstores, at newsstands, a bookshop, any place that sold, a malt shop that sold magazines. And it kicked off, of course, with Famous Monsters. I mean, it wasn't the first, but it's the one that was the first one on the map. And I guess I'll be putting these in the middle of, at least this one in the middle of us, just to show it off here. And
There's issue one.
right, and 1958, and from there they came hard and fast. A lot of magazines lasted a few issues, some only one, but Famous Monsters lasted well into the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, and it had some great covers, great stories, great articles, and they reviewed horror films, and Forey loved reviewing Lon Chaney movies, and it was just a fun magazine. So before I get to the others, and we do kind of a countdown, Court, why don't you show some of your copies that you have?
Well, in fact, I wish, I've always wanted to do the upgrade, but I kind of got stuck in the reader's copy type world because that's what I could afford. So here is issue number one without a cover, but it
Right,
meant that I, paid like $5 for this a million years ago. So, and in fact, the first 20 issues of FM I have a pretty complete run, are here in a series of these uh, original notebooks. And when you talk about the covers, oh, good Lord, look, I opened up to one of my all time favorites. It's just gorgeous. Uh, there is, say, it's hard for me to see. There's Gorgo,
right.
just terrific. And Basil Gogas, of course, being the champion. Oh, look, it's a fear book. And this is, here you go, from our first six issues.
Right, yeah, I remember those
There we go.
yearbooks.
Yeah. And of course, oh, I love this. On the back here, of course, Famous Monsters was going to be the place. Oh, this is wonderful. That's the Outer Limits, Robert Culp. And then here on the back, up there we go.
You can order that, Court.
You bet, those wonderful posters. And naturally, we all drooled over the Don Post calendar masks and all the rest of it. But the thing is, Famous Monsters really was, Forey Ackerman was the public figure of the magazine. James Warren, of course, was the publisher. and the man responsible for so much of the content. So it was an interesting thing. Well, Warren made the choice to go into business with Ackerman because he knew Forey had the science fiction, fantasy, and horror, if you will, profile. That he could connect with the conventions, he could connect with the young readers. He became Uncle Forey to generations. And, now and you can see all this crazy stuff in here in the other room. My God, forget it. Uh, Growing up in the 1960s as part of the monster boom, is like, unless somebody experienced it, it really seems like we're speaking a foreign language, because shock theater on television, new horror films from Hammer and American International in the theaters, model kits, coloring books, masks. As you said, it was Halloween every day. It just didn't stop. And of course, there was no VHS, there was no home video, so that's where the Castle films came in, which you could order from the back of Famous Monsters and everything else. But it was this like nuclear explosion of horror. And there was FM, which, under Warren's insistence, kind of slanted its articles and things towards younger readers. And Forey loved his puns and, Horrorwood, California, and all that stuff. So there was FM. But then, though, if you were buying Famous Monsters, you also probably wanted to buy Castle of Frankenstein. And,
Right. So I'm gonna,
you know,
yeah, I'm gonna show
and,
some right now. Here are some of the. There's the first few ones. There was the Black Zoo magazine, and the Brave Ghouls, and Cinema 57, which actually Cinema 57 is what Forey used kind of as an inspiration to do that, to do Famous Monsters. And so let's see if I can show them here.
okay, Castle of Frankenstein was, the Famous Monsters had kind of opened up the marketplace, but Castle of Frankenstein was a much more serious and scholarly magazine. That was Calvin T. Beck, and Joe Dante was one of the writers for the magazine. And it was a different approach to this subject matter. And they also had a lot of interviews with people. And Jim Warren apparently didn't really like to do interviews. He felt that the age group for the readership of Famous Monsters was a little young to understand what Edward Van Sloan or someone like that had to say about anything. Although Forey did keep doing it. It would be snuck in, but Castle of Frankenstein always wanted to do interviews with filmmakers. And that was, again, much more of a journalistic approach to monsters and to horror, rather than, if you will, with the jokes and the puns that became so much a part of the delightful formula of Famous Monsters, which was just a monolithic success. Okay, well, this is when everything kind of just went basically nuclear for monster magazines, and you'd go into the drugstore and they would just be absolutely everywhere. This Curse of Frankenstein, Horror of Dracula Double was in fact published by Warren and was available through Famous Monsters, and they are film books of both movies done with stills and thought balloons and dialogue balloons throughout, so you're literally reading the movie like a comic book.
Right.
Fantastic Monsters of the films was that was the offshoot of the incredible work of Paul Blaisdell and Bob Burns, who started their own monster magazine, and they wanted to do something again that was more, if you will, literate, and definitely emphasizing behind the scenes, because Paul Blaisdell was the great special effects man behind It Conquered the World and The She-Creature and Not of This Earth and all those wonderful American International movies. And that was his creation, that magazine. And unfortunately, that magazine, which is wonderful, and back issues are real prized possessions, that went under because the printers had a fire, which they now think was just an insurance scam, but wiped out the magazine, wiped out its opportunity. Now, For Monsters Only was one of the magazines that would traditionally just take stills from old horror movies, and then add funny captions and balloons and things like that. And every once in a while, you'd see something really cool in there. I had an issue with, I want to say, a Gray Morrow cover that was really startling with an ape, and but it was definitely kind of a little more geared towards the fun and games, and then they would intersperse that with serious articles. Horror Monsters was really built, it seems to me, out of publicity materials that was issued for movies that were either playing on Shock Theater or new packages that were being sold to television or what was in the movie theaters. So the studios, of course, were always sending out new photographs and new written material and whatever. And Horror Monsters always struck me as just kind of being the place where all of that stuff was kind of pasted together. And there was always the problem of repeating material from magazine to magazine, because how much are you going to be able to write about the Mummy's Curse? You know, there was kind of a repetition there, unless you were covering new movies. Horror at Party Beach was another one of the Warren one-offs that the double of Horror of Dracula and Curse of Frankenstein, and then also the Mole People. And all three of those were available. Now here is, okay, Journal of Frankenstein is in fact the very first of Castle of Frankenstein. That was how it was originally marketed. So that was Calvin T. Beck, and again, a very scholarly, interested approach to horror. Mad Monsters was another. I always loved that cover, but it was another magazine that kind of emphasized more comedy captions and things like that. And then interspersed with serious articles. Modern Monsters, that was a short-lived little magazine. They would do, again, the retro articles about things, and then try and catch up with if there was, in fact, any new horror playing in the theaters, whether it was Dracula AD 72 or what have you. Monster Mania, I loved, because the layouts and everything else in it were very, very superior. And look at this, an interview with Jack Pierce, a thing about Rasputin the Mad Monk, the Peter Cushing story. That magazine really had the goods. And if you were really seriously interested, also too, it wasn't just being interested in monsters, it was being interested in movies and making movies. So any one of these magazines that would print a still of Jack Pierce making up Lon Chaney Jr. or some behind-the-scenes photograph from The Bride of Frankenstein or something, which Famous Monsters did an awful lot of. Oh my gosh, that was just like manna from heaven to be given the opportunity to see that stuff, because it wasn't available to us. It wasn't snap your fingers and go online or anything. That didn't exist. So we relied on these magazines. Monster World, of course, had the bizarre history because it was started as a sister magazine to Famous Monsters to appear in the months where Famous Monsters was not published. What happened was they just decided to fold the Monster World run, which I believe was 10 issues, maybe 12, into the run of Famous Monsters of Filmland. So Famous Monsters of Filmland skipped that number of issues and just said, well, Monster World was the same thing. It was all of us once again. So yeah, it's just, we're just going to have it here. But they wanted to, make sure that there was some Warren publication, Monster Magazine, on the newsstands 12 months out of the year. And Monsters Unlimited. Again, another, let's do the funny captions. There's Lon Chaney from the Mummy's Tomb. And it was a fun, Monsters Unlimited was the magazine you bought at the beach.
Right.
If you couldn't find anything else. Now, Spacemen was the magazine, again, Jim Warren, and they wanted to cover science fiction, really trying to divide the genres so that, and Ackerman was very involved with science fiction. His wife was involved with the paperback series Perry Rodan, And so they said, well, let's have a forum just for science fiction. It has nothing to do with Wolfman or Universal Horror. And that was Spacemen. And it was short lived, but it was a very, very good magazine. And it was also able to cover current events because, of course, this was at the time when we were in the space race to get to the moon. So this was something that was on a lot of people's minds, and it wasn't just for the movies. The Werewolves and Vampires, I think that looks like a one-off from maybe Eerie Publications. I think that's right. And I've actually never seen that magazine. Creatures was another one that I think was, they were, or I should say World Famous Creatures, was a magazine that, again, they were trying to go for a slightly more scholarly approach. Lots of great photographic images, and that cover from Curse of the Demon is just, I think, wonderful.
Right. And last but not least, I'd be remiss if we didn't mention the Monster Times Court.
Oh, the Monster Times. The Monster Times. What's cool about the Monster Times is that it arrived when Famous Monsters and Castle of Frankenstein was kind of, gotten very sporadic, and Famous Monsters. And remember, too, this was all before the introduction of Fangoria. So everything was kind of sputtering out because the interest in the old Universal Horror movies and whatever was going on in American International was starting to subside, at least on the magazine front. And Warren was, of course, emphasizing Vampirella, Eerie, and Creepy in all their black and white magazines, which Marvel also had stepped in and started to do. So it was really a battle between photo-driven magazines and comic-driven magazines. And then here comes the Monster Times, printed like a newspaper. And it was hip. It had a poster inside, and it looked at old movies, it looked at new movies. Hey, here's an interview with Christopher Lee. This is what Hammer is doing. Here's something about Godzilla. Here's a great picture of Ingrid Pitt. They were terrific, and they were also being distributed to schools. I used to get mine at a record store in downtown Pittsburgh, and kind of one of the big secrets about the Monster Times was it was published by Al Goldstein, who published Screw. That's why the format was the newspaper format. And they kept that very, very under wraps because school libraries looked at the Monster Times and said, something, this is a lot of fun and it will get kids to read, which it did. So the origin, or where the checks were coming from, was something that absolutely nobody was supposed to know about until, of course, after it went out of business.
Right. So that is our look at monster magazines of the 50s and 60s. So, Court,
the tip of the iceberg.
The tip of the iceberg, right? There's probably another dozen I could have shown, but those are the ones that I thought had the most influence, at least from my research. And there's Eerie and Vampirella and some other ones as well. But anyway, Court, great info as always. But we want to thank you for joining us here on this episode. And we've got some great episodes coming up where we're going to discuss the Inner Sanctum series. And we're going to discuss the Sherlock Holmes Basil Rathbone films. And we'd like you to pull up a chair and grab your favorite adult beverage and some popcorn as Court and I discuss classic horror. And Court and I look forward to seeing you next time. So long. Thank you for joining us. Join us next time when we'll cover other topics like Universal Horror, Poverty Row, and profiles on people like Bela Lugosi, John Carradine, Peter Lorre, and even on myself. Until next time, stay scared.